salespeople are driven by money. They're coin operated, big commission checks are their thing. And I've got Darcy here, and you help salespeople find strategies to reduce tax. I'm all ears. Let's go. What does that look like? How do you do that?
Yeah. Every salesperson that I've ever met wants to reduce their tax. Is probably the number one thing that people bring up when we start talking about helping them improve their finances. And yeah, there's a whole heap of different strategies that you can look at. And a lot of them generally boil down to a couple of key things. One thing is how you're structuring your investments and your assets. And then another thing generally is having tax deductible expenses. So yeah, that sort of opens a whole can of worms and different strategies that you can look at. But some of the typical things, using things like superannuation, contributing to superannuation, investing in someone else's name or another structure. So if you've got a spouse that earns less money than you, has a lower tax bracket, you could look at investing through their name instead of your name, as an example. And then when it comes to expenses, it could be things like borrowing to invest. So interest expenses on borrowing to invest are a tax deductible expense. And that's a strategy that can work really well for a lot of salespeople. But obviously, everything we're talking about here is general in nature. So this isn't personal financial advice or anything like that. So just important to bear in mind. And I do need to let everyone know that I'm an authorized representative of Lifespan Financial Planning, whose AFSL is 229892.
Awesome. So lots of strategies, lots of options. And I guess really that goes for everybody in every walk of life as to, I want to invest, I want to reduce my tax, I want to make my money go further. And how do you navigate that with, if we're very much on the topic of salespeople, is that they'll have a base, but their commission will be up and down, up and down, up and down throughout their lifetime, usually. Often the goal is to keep it a bit more consistent, but there's no guarantee of that. So how are you, how would somebody as a salesperson make decisions on what they should be investing in, and how is that done? Because I know from my side and my understanding of investment that whenever I was commission focused, it was much harder for me to decide how much I should spend on a house, what money I'm going to have left over, because I'd always have a guarantee of a base, but my commission, like how do you decide on that?
Yeah, it really depends on the remuneration structure for the person in question, because some people are fully commission. Some people just have a small part of their pay as commission. So it really depends on your situation. For a lot of people, I generally think the best rule of thumb is if you can basically live off your base salary and then your commissions on top of that are what you're using to get ahead financially to invest for that kind of thing, that's the ideal way to do it. Because if you have a really, really bad month, you don't have any commission coming in, at least your bare minimum expenses are met. That's generally the best way to do things and my preferred way of doing things. And you're going to get ahead a lot quicker if you're using those commissions to invest and to actually improve your position compared to paying for things like a house and living expenses. So that's ideal. Obviously, with the prices of property and the way people are paid nowadays, it isn't always possible to do that. But I'd say that's my preferred way of doing things. In terms of a fallback option, if you can't do that, if you do need to rely on your commissions a lot, I'd say the best option is to be realistic. Understand what you're actually earning historically. Don't look at what your on-target earnings are if you're generally missing quota. If you're only getting to 70% of quota and you should be earning 200K, be earning 140K, whatever it is, actually look at what you've actually earned. Don't base everything on your on-target earnings or what you think you're going to earn, because you've got this deal in the pipeline that should come through, but it might not. You really want to base things on reality and do a bit of an audit on what you've earned in the past and work that way if you can't make things work off of the base.
And what do you find most salespeople want to invest in?
Generally, they want to invest in stuff that's high growth, high risk, and like the sexy investments. Some, tech company that they reckon is going to X, crypto, all these kinds of things like that. And generally, I'd say if it was that easy to get rich, everyone would just be doing that, right? Like if everyone could pick NVIDIA before the boom, everyone would have done it. But the reality is you can't do that consistently. Like everyone thinks that they're smarter than they are when it comes to investing. So I'd say take a boring approach. Like the good thing about being in sales is you have the potential to earn a really good income. And what you should be doing with that income is investing in boring investments that have a proven track record that are going to work. So most salespeople want to invest in stuff that I would generally turn them away from. Look, if I thought it was best for my clients to invest in these like exciting, interesting investments that they're already keen on, it would be a lot easier for me to sell them on that. Like I could say, yeah, let's do this thing that you're already really excited about. I'll set it all up for you. Generally, I'm having to sort of steer them away from these things that they want to do and into something that might be a bit more boring. But the reason I'm doing that is because it's going to provide a better outcome for them.
And the riskier things, like, is that still something that you say go and do if you're interested? Like, go and do it, but do a smaller percent, or are you just saying just don't even bother?
Yeah, generally for most people, they're not going to follow my advice if I say don't invest in crypto at all, as an example. So my general advice to people is if that's what you want to do, if you want to invest some money there, yeah, put a little bit in there, but only put what you're willing to lose in there if it's a high risk investment like that. And I'm not opposed to like high risk investments. Generally, if you want to generate a higher return, you need to take more risks. That's generally how investing works. Is the higher risk you take, generally the higher return you will get over the long run. But there's smart high risk investments and then dumb high risk investments. So I would generally steer people towards the more boring high risk investments that have a good track record performing well.
Yeah, and I think salespeople are, and I'll say salespeople in general, every salesperson I've met, including myself, is that, we're there with high risk, high reward. And that was, when I got into the business, I always into the industry, I always remember working for a large organization back in the UK. And I remember the marketing manager being really annoyed that we were all heading off to like Verbier, I think, skiing for a week. And we'd all target where we were going. And she spat out her dummy a little bit. Fair enough. I think marketing and sales, they definitely are together. But in this business, the CEO was like, well, look, you at any point can come over and you can get paid the same amount that they get paid. And then you get paid on what you generate. The door is always open. So anybody that ever would see or grumble or say something, he'd be like, you come in, no problem. Half your salary, come in, and then you have to earn your other salary back and more, because that's just what you'll end up doing. If you want to come and do it. And I think the high risk, high reward lifestyle is, I guess, where it is, the vibe is where it comes from. I think the interesting thing, because with investment, is that for me as a salesperson, that was never anything I thought about. I just wanted the next fanciest car. I wanted to go on the next holiday. I wanted to buy the things, because that's what we're taught as salespeople by our managers and by the leaders, is to want to buy and own the next big thing. So if somebody wants to buy the next house, great. Like, we've locked in. We're paying them this base rate. They're killing it, and they're never going to leave because they have to pay for that mortgage.
The golden handcuffs, yeah.
Yeah, the golden handcuffs. Like, how does that play a part in what you help them navigate?
Yeah, no, it's a huge thing, and look, it's an uphill battle. Like, trying to convince salespeople to sort of think beyond the next big thing, like you're talking about. They've got lots of different people, like their colleagues, and social media nowadays is sort of driving people towards focusing on those materialistic sides of things. My approach isn't to forego that altogether. My approach is more to think about things a bit more long-term and kind of balance things out a bit. There's a concept that I've started talking about, which I call going from earner to owner. So most salespeople, like you said, are focused on the next big commission check, making a lot of money, and all this stuff is tied to their personal exertion. You've got to work, you've got to keep showing up. And a lot of salespeople as well want to have a bit of an exit strategy. Like, most people love sales, like the job and everything, like the highs and the lows of it, and the emotional side of it and the income. But a lot of people don't want to do that forever. And that is a bit of a burnout career. So the only way you're going to get out of that is if you become what I call an owner, someone that owns assets that earn for them, that produce an income for them, that can pay for their lifestyle. So when you start working in your career, unless you come from like a wealthy family where they're providing money for you, you're essentially just earning everything through your personal exertion, through working, through sales. To get to the point where you can retire and you no longer need to do that anymore, the only way you can really do it is by investing and by building up a pool of assets that will generate an income for you and generate capital growth. So that can be things like property, shares. It can even be something more boring, like a defensive investment, like a savings account. Most people would have a savings account that generates interest for them. You need to build up enough assets that can generate enough income for you so you don't need to keep working if you ever want to get to that point where you're really wealthy and you're no longer relying on your income. Once you get to that point, it's a great lifestyle because you've got the assets there that can provide for you, and you can earn on top of that, and you can just, build and build and build from there.
And so you said before about high risk, you're looking at high risk but boring, or
Yeah.
boring investments because you know that they're stable, that they're there, they're going to keep them going.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Like, we're beginning of 2025. What should people be looking at or considering for this year?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say for most people, they probably haven't got the basics sorted. So that's where you should really start. The basics are looking at things like reviewing the fees on your investment. So the more you're paying in fees, the less that you get to keep at the end of the day. Look at the level of risk you're taking in your investments. So generally higher risk investments will generate higher returns over the long run. You need to be able to wear those ups and downs though. Like if you're investing in a high growth portfolio, in a bad year, you'll have a 30+% loss. So you need to be willing to deal with those kinds of drops. So making sure you've reviewed the risk of your investments, and if you're happy to take on that level of risk, if you're a long-term thinker who wants to get a good long-term return, you have a long time horizon. Someone in their 30s and 40s probably won't need that money until they're in their 60s, for example. They can take that risk generally. And then how you structure things to reduce tax. So whether that be investing in a spouse's name, using something like an investment bond, for instance, or contributing money to super, reducing your tax and making sure that what you're actually earning, the investment growth is growing, not sort of going towards paying tax. They're some of the key things that people should be looking at. And then I guess another thing that has just jumped out in my mind is making sure you're actually investing now. Like a lot of salespeople, when I speak to them about this stuff, they say, yeah, like I'm doing okay now, but in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, I'll be earning so much more. I can start investing then. Not delaying it. So getting started is another key thing. Like most people would be already investing inside their superannuation, but a lot of people, that's it. Like they don't have any investments outside of that. I wouldn't consider your house an investment, your house that you live in, because you need somewhere to live. If you want to sell it, you're going to have to buy another place to live in. That's not getting to the point where you're an owner, where you have an asset generating an income for you. You can't like make money off your house you live in unless you sell it, and you'll have to buy somewhere else. So most people really just have their superannuation, have their house, and they're not doing too much outside of that. So you got to get started. Like if you want to get ahead, you need to get started.
And what's the easiest thing to get into?
Yeah, easiest approach is a managed fund. So there's heaps of different options out there. And you can look at exchange traded funds as well. So they're basically listed funds. So the reason I generally steer people towards an option like this is it's generally low cost, it's generally well diversified, and you don't have to do the thinking about which shares are getting purchased. You're not having to research individual companies. You could do something as simple as investing in an ASX 200 exchange traded fund, pay something like 0.04% in fees, I think is the lowest one on the market at the moment. And that just buys the top 200 companies in Australia. You don't need to think about it. It's very, very simple. So there are very simple ways to get started.
Yeah. Is that like compound investing?
Yeah. So you can look at things like dividend reinvestment plans through an investment like that, where so an investment like an exchange traded fund that's investing in the top 200 companies in Australia, with that investment, that will grow over time. So the value of that will increase as the value of the companies that asset, that structure holds increases. But also the companies will pay profits out to that investment, and they will then pay those profits to you. So what you can do is you can reinvest those profits automatically, and then it will continue to grow and compound. So that's a good idea for people to consider something like that.
And with regards to housing, I mean, we're both in Australia. House prices, I don't know where they are like around the world, but I know here are extremely high. And finding an investment property, isn't that what everyone's trying to find? Is that $300,000 investment that they get to make back a 6.8% yield, year on year? How is housing property still something that people should consider?
Yeah, I think it's a good strategy to consider. It's a very heated political issue at the moment. With strategies and investing, one of the things that I think people need to consider is the legislative risk and potential for changes when it comes to investing. So I think it's going to be a big part of the upcoming election. There's going to be policies to do with housing, in my view. I wouldn't be surprised if there's policies around investing in housing and changes to tax benefits when it comes to investing in housing. So I think people need to keep that in mind and understand that it's probably a little bit more risky to be investing in investment properties now than it was 10 years ago, just because it is so politically charged. Yeah. So look, it still is a good strategy, but I'd say from a legislative risk standpoint, it hasn't ever been so on the nose as it is now. So yeah, I'd just say be mindful and think about your overall strategy to building your wealth as well. Like a lot of people that go down the property path go really hard into residential property. Like they put all of their eggs in that residential property basket. And a lot of the time people will also just like do it all in the one area. So you might live in Perth, buy investment property in Perth, have multiple properties in that one area or even in one suburb. And that isn't a great idea. So if you are going to go down that residential property path as well, just think about diversifying. Like the same kind of thing I would recommend someone do if they're investing in direct shares. You wouldn't want to buy 10 shares and have them all in the financial services space. You want to have one in mining, one in financial services, a tech business, a medical business. You want to have a broad range, because if you go all in on the residential property side of things and the market gets hammered, there's big changes with tax, for instance, like you get hit pretty hard. And if we have a look at what happened in Victoria, so where I'm from, not where I am now, in Victoria, the property prices have really stagnated and dropped in some areas. And one of the big reasons for that is the changes to tax for investors, land tax for investment properties. So it's only a small change that's happened from a tax perspective, but that has had a big impact on prices and how they've fared compared to the other states in the country. Yeah, I'd say people need to really consider their overall strategy. And it's a politically charged area at the moment, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I'm seeing this shift with that in Airbnb, and I don't know whether you still class that as residential, but from an Airbnb perspective, I've got friends that have all, bought houses, especially in Dunsborough wine region, and they some of them bought them when they were like $300,000, and they're now selling for $950,000 3 years later. And so massive opportunity. But then as soon as that happens, everyone catches on. Now all the houses are 900 to get in to buy, and therefore then the selling's not going to be as high, and it's what will happen and what will change. And I guess looking at those legislations, we're not in control of, are we? So it's, like you said, I guess it's being mindful. There's always a risk in investment, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Every investment carries a level of risk. So you just need to understand what risk you're taking. Like even if you're investing in cash, so we'll consider cash to be the lowest risk investment. In Australia, authorised deposit-taking institutions are guaranteed by the government to protect $250,000 of your savings. So if you've got $200K in a bank and the bank goes bust and they're an ADI, the government will actually back that and then basically cover that. But if you had, say, $500,000 with the one institution, you'd only be covered for $250,000. So, I mean, that's like even cash, the most defensive investment, will carry some level of risk. So every investment has risk. You just need to understand how much risk you're taking and what level you're comfortable with. If you, as well, like if you were to just invest in cash, you go, I want to be as safe as possible, I'll just invest in cash. You have to fight inflation. Inflation will probably outstrip the value of your cash. So you have to take risk when you invest. You just have to understand how much risk you want to take and be comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's fair. With, you mentioned before about a base and then using the commission or the bonus to be able to help you go further. Some people won't be able to do that, but they may still be interested in investing in something. What percentage should you be thinking of? I've listened to so many podcasts and read so many books around, you take this percentage, put it in weekly, do this. Yeah. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to sort of put a set percentage on things. You hear lots of different financial people talk about, you should invest 20% of your salary or whatever it is. The reality is everyone's situation is going to be different. Like if you're in a couple and you don't have any children and you're both high income earners, you have a lot more capacity to invest compared to if you're a sole income earner, you've got a partner, but you have 3 kids and you have a mortgage as well. So it is quite tricky. And like you were saying, some people won't have the capacity to just live off their base. So it really depends on your situation. I would say everyone needs to sort of understand that the longer you take to start investing, the harder it's going to be. The more and more you delay it, the harder it's going to be for you to get ahead. So start little if you need to, but start as early as you can. And sort of going back to what we were saying before, there are some really simple options to start investing, like exchange traded funds, like managed funds. If you want to get started with an even lower amount of investing, you could look at something like a micro investing platform. There's platforms out there that will let you invest with $50, for example. I think most salespeople probably need to like review their priorities because they generally are earning good money and generally can invest, a lot more. So I'd say really think about your priorities, think about how long you want to be doing this for. Do you want to work all the way up until you're 65, 67 when you're allowed to access your superannuation? Let's say you're in your 30s kind of thing, it'll probably be that kind of age by the time these people get to that point. At the moment, you can access it earlier, but I'm just sort of thinking ahead here. Or do you want to retire early? Do you want to have some more flexibility around your lifestyle? If you do, you're going to have to make some changes. You're going to have to start investing. You can't keep putting it off because the more you put it off, the harder it's going to be to get ahead. So think about your priorities. Do you need that nice car, or is it better to have sort of a middle of the road car and retire 10 years earlier? Like, it's up to you. The power is in your hands.
I think you just lost every salesperson.
Yeah.
Just like, no.
Harsh reality. Like I'm very direct with my clients and the people I work with. So, I think they appreciate it. It's going to turn some people off. But if you want someone to just tell you everything's okay and you don't need to change, I'm not your guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm not your guy. Why salespeople? Why not CEOs? Why not, any other industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had a career break for about 3 years from financial planning and worked in software sales. So doing that, I got to meet a lot of great people and I got to experience working in B2B sales. So I got to see what that was like. Got to experience the highs and the lows and calling a million people and everything, all that stuff. But one of the things I saw is a lot of salespeople weren't really making the best decisions with their finances and weren't doing things to get ahead, even though they were earning really good money. And looking at the market for financial advisors, I noticed there wasn't really anyone that helped salespeople specifically. Like you were saying, why not CEOs? Like there's a lot of financial advisors that will target those C-level, C-suite executives as clients. There's advisors that will target doctors and lawyers, but no one really working with salespeople. So I saw a bit of a gap in the market, and having that experience doing it myself, I was a lot more passionate about it compared to working with a doctor. Like, doctors are great people, they're doing great work, but I'm just probably not as passionate about helping them as I am as helping salespeople. So that's how I ended up working with salespeople. And I'm really passionate. I've done it myself. I understand what the challenges are like. I know how hard salespeople work for their money, and I don't want it to all be for nothing. And for a lot of salespeople, they're not really getting ahead with all their hard work. So you're no better off earning a high income than someone earning an average income if you're not making moves to get ahead. Like you need to actually utilize that high income to get ahead.
Especially when you see how much tax goes out. Like you said, the managing tax, reducing how much of that you're paying. Interesting. Yeah. I've got an interesting thought for when you said before about, spouses that earn less money and then putting that in their name. Now, I have a lot of friends that are getting divorced right at the moment. And money is a big thing within that, whether it's the male side or female side. If you've then built this up, put it into that, and then you separate, you're then no better. I'm throwing this out there. You're then no better off than what you were before if you end up doing that. Like, what's the fail safe around that? Because I think that's something that there's very little education around, divorce settlements and all of that, all that information. But I'm just thinking from that makes sense. And my accountant looks at me and my husband together, and they look at, what we're spending, how we're spending it, how we can, offset. Awesome. But I'm just thinking for people that go, oh, great, I'm going to do that. I'll chuck it in without thinking about where that may end up. Yeah, no,
it's a good thing to keep in mind. So obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a financial advisor. I'm restricted in terms of what I can give advice on, and also just my understanding of things. Like I have more of a base level understanding of the ins and outs of what happens if you get divorced compared to a lawyer that specializes in that area. So generally, there's a couple of ways you can handle things. If you're coming into a relationship with more assets than you could look at setting up a binding financial agreement. So that is essentially like a prenup, like the Australian version. People are probably familiar with that term, like a prenup. So you could look at that, setting one of those up. If you're earning this money and you're investing and building this while you're married and while you're together, I think it's going to be pretty hard to claim that it's all yours. Like generally, when you get separated, it would be treated as if it's both of your money because you're in that relationship. So that's my understanding. So I don't think your money is going to be protected if you keep it all in your name. You pay more tax on it, but you go, well, it's in my name, I'm protected. You're not really going to, that isn't going to offer protection for you as opposed to looking at a binding financial agreement. And the reality is if you separate from someone, the assets are going to get split. So there's only sort of so much you can do around it. So I'd say if you are concerned around that, speak to a lawyer that specializes in that area, and potentially look at setting one of those up, a binding financial agreement. Otherwise, it's just one of those unfortunate things of life. Like, if you do separate, you're probably going to cop a financial loss if you're the one that's got more money and earning more.
Yeah, interesting. I always think it's something to consider as well. And so, salespeople you've got at the moment, like, where are you? Like, have you got a story? Like, can you share one where somebody wasn't investing, and then maybe whether you can share what they've actually invested in, but kind of in terms of the realms and where they are now, just so people can get an idea. Because I think it's it's easy to listen and go, okay, great, you've said to invest here or consider that, but what let's take an average Joe and go about it from that perspective. What could you share around that?
Yeah, so I won't give any names or specifics, because obviously I wouldn't talk about that before I sort of clear it up with the client. But just thinking of a recent scenario, which is generally the holistic approach I'd like to take to get the fundamentals right for clients. I have a couple came to me, between the two of them earning probably around $300,000. Yeah, they hadn't really reviewed the stuff before and set up the basics. They were in a good position. Like, a lot of their mortgage was paid off, so they were getting ahead on that side of things, but they hadn't really done too much outside of that. A couple of kids. So we looked at things and had a conversation around what they're wanting to do over the next few years. The client, the male in the couple, he is looking to buy into the business that he's working in at the moment. So that's something that we've got on the radar for doing down the track. And then they also want to upgrade their house as well. So there's a few things that are going to happen in the sort of short to near term within their finances. So we just started a simple investment approach, manage a portfolio of managed funds for them, where they started with, I think it was only about $10K, something like that, a relatively simple amount for them to put in. And then they're putting in about $1,000 a month from memory. As well, we review both their superannuation funds. So this is something that most people in Australia in sales haven't really reviewed before. They both just had some pretty basic investments. They'd never picked the investments in their superannuation funds. So they were just in the default options. Okay. Yeah, so you can change the investment. So we put them in a much better portfolio of investments within that super fund. And we also moved them into a fund that has some tax benefits, so they can save tax compared to what they were doing before within that superannuation environment. Then the other thing we did for them as well is setting up personal insurances. So most salespeople haven't really thought about insuring themselves. Like, if you've got that nice new car, you've probably got insurance on it, but these clients didn't have personal insurance. So what I mean by that is like life insurance or income protection insurance. So they didn't have insurance around their income. So if they can't work because they get sick or injured, the income tap turns off. They've got nothing coming in. So we put insurance around that. So if they're sick or injured, that is covered. So it was just a pretty simple approach, nothing sort of too out of the box, but just optimizing investments and tax within their super, getting them investing outside of super. We didn't go too heavy into it because of the plans to buy into the business and to change their properties as well. So that sort of was a bit of a roadblock there, because, like I said, it's about balance. We don't want to sort of sacrifice everything. We still want to make sure you're doing the things in your life that you want to, but take those steps to get ahead. So just do the small investment for them to get ahead on that side of things as well. So yeah, that's pretty typical of what I would do for someone.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess it's looking at things that they've not thought of. I think insurance is something I've only just thought of and put in place, because you don't really think about it until usually it happens to somebody else, and then you're like, what? Like, I won't have anything if this is the way that we go. And especially, like you said, salespeople have got the ability to earn a lot. So if you do become of that high income earner, and you've got investments that you're putting into and have to cover the fees of, plus your lifestyle, it's something that's definitely very important. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And I think there's lots. I mean, I know it's difficult to kind of give, very in-depth information. So if people want to reach out and find out more specifically about their situations, you're currently traveling around Australia. Are you doing in-person meetings on your travels, or do you want everyone to come find you on LinkedIn or somewhere else?
If someone wants to travel to the outback or wherever I am, they're more than welcome to meet in person. I won't be catching a little plane all the way to Sydney or something from the outback. So I'd say mainly online. So I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the main platform that I use. So people can find me, Darcy O'Rourke. I'm not too sure if there's any other Darcy O'Rourke's on LinkedIn, but I'm sure I'll pop up. I'll probably have a few mutual connections with anyone in the sales space. So they can find me on there, or they can jump online and Google me, or message or call me. My number is 0404 713 207, so they can I'm an open book. They can reach me directly. And yeah, I'm doing
You're a
everything
true
online like this
salesperson.
podcast. Yeah, true salesperson. You've always got to drop the plug in there. I'll answer anytime. Yeah, it's here. It's ready to go.
Call him. I hope somebody calls you.
Yeah.
I really, really do. So yeah, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing so much about what you do, Darcy. It's a very interesting topic and certainly something that I hope a lot of people now have got some ideas around to be able to go through. It's a very different topic to what we usually have on the Sell Like You podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.